The road sliced through the North Yorkshire moors, shrouded in an icy mist just before sunrise. On most mornings, the B-217 was silent except for the crows and the distant hum of an early commuter's radio. But today, a battered van rattled around a bend, headlights spearing into the darkness, then jerked to a sudden, screeching halt. The driver's heart hammered in his chest. There, in the middle of the road, half lit by the van's beams, stood a dapple-grey mare, her breath steaming in the cold air, rain shining on her flanks. "What the—" He yanked the wheel, tires shrieking, missing the animal by inches. The mare flinched, skittered sideways, then froze, eyes wide and wild. The driver's hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone. The entire village knew that horse. He hit record, sent a trembling voice note to the town WhatsApp group. "Avalon's loose again. Somebody get her before there's a damn accident. She nearly killed me out here." Within minutes, the message blazed through Bramblewick. Word traveled quickly in the old village, especially when it concerned the Whitmores and their haunted, beautiful horse. In Whitmore Hall, Liv Whitmore bolted upright in bed, woken not by the chime of her alarm, but by the distant clang of the front gates. Her phone pinged, 3, 4, 5 messages in rapid succession. Each one carried the same urgent panic. She didn't need to read them. She already knew. She was out of bed in seconds, shoving her feet into boots, grabbing her waxed jacket off the hook. Wind rattled the window panes as she raced down the corridor, past portraits of ancestors and the faded gaze of her mother. Her breath caught, just for a moment, at the sight of Lady Charlotte's smile, forever frozen, forever out of reach. Liv tore her eyes away, pulse racing. She sprinted down the grand staircase, through the echoing marble foyer, shoving open the heavy oak doors. Outside, the world was soaked in rain and fear. Lights swung wildly across the drive as villagers' cars lined up at the gates, forming a makeshift barricade. Shadows huddled near the fence, voices urgent, one or two already blaming the Whitmores for letting that cursed beast roam again. Liv ducked under the iron arch, rain lashing her cheeks. She could hear the soft, desperate whinnies drifting from the hedgerow. Every nerve in her body screamed. She remembered, too clearly, the day her mother died. The same wind, the same storm, the same horse, but she ran toward the sound, heart pounding. There, just beyond the main gates, Avalon trembled, sodden, tail plastered to her flanks. The great horse's sides heaved. She looked both powerful and heartbreakingly lost, raindrops silvering her mane, eyes glazed with confusion. Her ears flicked, torn between flight and recognition. Liv called out, voice cracking, "Avalon, Avalon, come here!" The horse froze, head raised, nostrils flaring. For an instant, Liv saw her mother's reflection in those wild, desperate eyes. Memories flared. Her mother laughing, hair tangled in the wind, Avalon rearing against the sky, the two of them fearless and free. But that was before the accident, before everything changed. Now, the horse stood rooted, trembling, the village lights throwing monstrous shadows on the grass. A shout split the night. "Enough, Olivia!" A heavy vehicle's engine roared, then headlights flooded the drive. Lord Edward Whitmore, her father, brought the Range Rover to a hard stop, blocking the gates. He stepped out, tall and severe in his dark overcoat, every inch the ex-cavalry officer turned member of Parliament. His face was rigid, jaw clenched tight. Liv squared her shoulders, not moving. "Get back inside, Olivia. I'll handle this." "No," Liv said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Lord Edward's glare was ice. "I said go inside, now." The villagers drew back, sensing the tension. The wind howled through the trees, slamming a gate shut with a metallic bang. Liv moved closer to Avalon, arms out, ignoring the mud splattering her jeans. The mare inched forward, snorting, each step slow and uncertain. One wrong move and the horse might bolt. Back onto the road, toward another accident, another tragedy. Liv held her ground. She's scared, Dad. She just wants to come home. She's dangerous, Lord Edward snapped. You know what happened last time. You remember, don't you? The words cut like a blade. Liv winced, but she didn't back down. The entire village seemed to be holding its breath. Phones hovered, ready to film. A whisper ran through the crowd, some muttering about curses, others about the ghost of Lady Charlotte. Avalon's ears flicked at Liv's voice, something soft in her gaze. She took another hesitant step, rain dripping from her lashes. Liv reached into her pocket, fingers closing around the crumpled sugar cubes she'd carried since childhood. It's okay, girl, she whispered, voice shaking. It's just me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. For a moment, the world was still. Just Liv, Avalon, and the cold weight of the past pressing on them both. Then Lord Edward stepped forward, voice thundering. Olivia, you will do as you're told. That animal is a menace. She nearly killed your mother, and she'll do it again if you keep defending her. Liv flinched, tears burning her eyes. But she didn't run. She held out her palm, sugar cubes glinting in the headlights. Avalon stretched her neck, nostrils quivering, then, slowly, gently, touched her nose to Liv's outstretched hand. A gasp ran through the villagers. Liv stroked Avalon's muzzle, whispering, You're safe now. I promise. Lord Edward stared, torn between anger and something else. Grief, maybe, or a fear he'd never spoken. He looked at Liv, then at Avalon, his jaw working. You have one chance, Olivia, he said, voice low. And if anything else happens, I'm calling animal control for everyone's safety. He turned, walked back to the Range Rover, slamming the door. The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. The storm not just in the sky, but alive in every corner of Whitmore Hall. Liv stood with Avalon, rain streaming down her face, the echoes of her father's ultimatum pounding in her ears. In the wet darkness, she knew, everything had changed. And whatever happened next, she was done being afraid. The storm did not let up. By midnight, the old stones of Whitmore Hall shuddered under sheets of rain, the wind howling around the eaves with a voice like grief itself. Liv sat by her window, staring at the distant paddock where Avalon now stood under the glow of a floodlight, ears twitching restlessly, shadows dancing along her sleek, dappled coat. Every so often, thunder shook the valley, and Liv's heart raced, not for herself, but for Avalon, alone out there, the world convinced she was cursed. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. She nearly killed your mother. She'll do it again. But Liv pressed her forehead to the cold glass, unwilling to believe that the animal she loved could be nothing but dangerous. She waited until the house fell silent. The staff retreated to their quarters. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 1, 2, then 3. Every tick stretched the knot in Liv's chest tighter. She moved quietly, slipping out of her room, socks muffling her steps across the wide, creaking floorboards. She carried only a small flashlight, the soft beam guiding her through twisting hallways lined with oil portraits and old, dust-shrouded armor. Tonight she didn't pause by her mother's portrait. She couldn't. Not when the pain still stung from her father's words. Instead, she crept toward the oldest wing of the house. the crumbling west corridor, where the air always smelled faintly of lavender and rust. At the end of the passage stood a door most people ignored. It was narrow, ancient, with a handle that never quite latched properly. Liv glanced over her shoulder. No sound but the wind rattling a window somewhere far behind. She turned the handle and slipped inside, closing the door just enough to block out the hall's faint light. The air was colder here, thick with the scent of rain seeping through ancient mortar. A spiral staircase wound up into the darkness, steps worn smooth by centuries of Whitmore feet. Liv's breath puffed white as she climbed, each footfall echoing in the narrow shaft. She reached the landing, a cramped, shadowy space beneath the clock tower, the gears above creaking in time with the storm. It was here that Lady Charlotte Whitmore had spent her happiest, quietest hours, sketching training plans for Avalon, writing in her battered, leather-bound journal, escaping the suffocating formality of Whitmore Hall for a few precious moments of freedom. Liv's flashlight danced across the room, illuminating boxes of old tack, riding boots, ribbons faded by time. She knelt beside a battered trunk she recognized instantly, its brass corners dulled but unbroken, the initials CW still faintly visible. Heart pounding, she opened it. Inside, carefully wrapped in linen, lay her mother's Royal Cavalry Medal, the medal Lady Charlotte had won at 19 for liberty riding, the kind of trust no whip or bridle could ever force. Liv brushed her fingers over the cold medal, feeling the weight of its story. Next to it, a stack of yellowed letters tied with blue ribbon, a sketchbook with wild, looping notes in her mother's hand, and finally, a small, hand-carved oak box. Liv's hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Nestled inside was a USB drive, the one her mother had carried everywhere in her last months, the one no one else in the family had ever unlocked. Liv swallowed hard, clutching the journal and the USB, her throat thick with hope and longing. Thunder rolled overhead. She crouched beside an old desk, plugging the USB into the ancient laptop that lived beneath a tarp of velvet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, and a video loaded. A young woman with copper hair, laughing as she galloped bareback across a field of yellow rapeseed, the sky endless. Avalon's mane streaming like a banner behind her. Liv pressed play. The image wavered, blurred by the passage of time, but the joy in her mother's voice was unmistakable. No reins, no fear, just trust. That's how you reach her heart. Avalon circled in the field, untethered, following Lady Charlotte's every gesture, a dance between human and horse. No need for force or fear. The camera wobbled as Lady Charlotte grinned, waving to whoever was filming, her father, probably, or maybe Maya, always with her phone. Liv watched, transfixed, tears blurring the screen as her mother dismounted, threw her arms around Avalon's neck, and whispered words the microphone barely caught. "I love you. Don't let anyone break what we have." Lightning flashed. Liv's chest ached. For 3 years, she'd lived in the shadow of that accident, haunted by the whispers of the village. Her father's cold silence, the stories that Avalon was cursed. But here, in the heart of the clock tower, with the proof of her mother's love and skill before her, Liv felt something shift, a stubborn, desperate hope swelling beneath the weight of grief. She opened the journal, flipping past sketches of bridleless riding, pages covered in looping cursive, lesson plans, poems, even little jokes for Liv as a child. On the last page, her mother had written, "If you ever doubt her, remember, she's only as brave as you are." Liv wiped her eyes, hugging the journal to her chest. The thunder quieted, rain drumming softly now, like a heartbeat. She realized what she needed to do. She had to win Avalon's trust again, just as her mother had. She had to fight the stories, the fear, even her father's anger. If she could bring back even a fraction of that magic, maybe she could heal more than just a horse. Down below, the clock tower struck 4, its chimes echoing across the storm-battered moors. Liv stood, straightened her jacket, and looked out the narrow window. In the darkness, Avalon's shape gleamed faintly, alone but unbroken. Liv pressed her hand to the cold glass. "I'm coming for you, girl. Tomorrow. We're taking back what's ours." She slipped out of the clock tower, heart racing with a wild courage she hadn't felt since her mother was alive. Whatever it took, she would not let Avalon or her mother's memory vanish beneath fear and lies. And in that silent, storm-lashed hour, Liv Whitmore was no longer just the last of a great family. She was a daughter ready to fight for the soul of Whitmore Hall. Morning at Whitmore Hall broke through a gray veil of clouds, softening the scars the night's storm had left across the grounds. The ancient lawn, lined with weathered hedges and the last wild bluebells, stretched toward the polo fields, an expanse of green that seemed endless but now felt oddly confining to Liv. She stood on the fringe of the field, adjusting her helmet and pulling on her gloves, trying to focus as the familiar rituals of her elite boarding school's equestrian team resumed. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the images she'd found in the clock tower. Her mother riding Avalon, no reins, no fear, laughter spilling out across the wildflowers. It felt like another world, a place she barely remembered except in dreams. "Eyes up, Liv! Ball's coming your way!" Coach Turner called, his whistle shrill over the thud of hooves and the sharp clack of mallets. Liv snapped to attention, just as a chestnut gelding thundered past, narrowly missing her stirrup. She fumbled her mallet, embarrassment burning her cheeks as a couple of classmates smirked. Liv gritted her teeth, forced herself to nod, then urged her own polo pony, Sprint, into a gentle canter. Sprint responded willingly, eager for work, but Liv's hands shook. She cast a glance at the distant paddocks, searching for a flash of dappled gray. All she saw was the sweep of the moor, and far off, the silhouette of the clock tower. The world felt split in two. Here, a place of rules, reputation, and whispered gossip. Over there, the shadow of Avalon and the burden of a truth no one else wanted to face. Just then, a soft voice interrupted her spiral of thought. "Hey, you're drifting again, Whitmore." Maya Pritchard appeared at Liv's side, her own pony trotting neatly, eyes twinkling beneath her helmet. She handed Liv a bottle of water and flashed her signature mischievous grin. "Don't tell me you're still worried about last night. You handled your dad and half the village. If it were me, I'd be hiding under my bed right now." Liv managed a weak smile. "You know how it is. Avalon's all anyone can talk about." Maya nodded, glancing around to make sure no teachers were close. Then, quick and secretive, she slipped something into Liv's palm, a tiny wireless mic. "For you, I want to capture what's really happening, not just the village rumors. Let's show everyone the truth for once." Liv hesitated, looking at the mic. "You're sure about this? If my dad finds out..." Maya rolled her eyes. "Your dad's been in Parliament too long. I'm more worried about Rupert Stockton. He's got that look, like he's just waiting to pounce. Anyway, someone needs to document what actually happens. You saw those group chats. Half the village wants Avalon shot, the other half's convinced she's some ghost." Liv bit her lip, anxiety rising. But Maya's determination was contagious, a stubborn light that refused to go out. Together they rode to the edge of the field, lowering their voices. Maya leaned in. "We need a plan. The only way to save Avalon is to prove she's not dangerous. To everyone, especially your dad. I've got a portable projector, your mom's video on a backup drive, and now this mic. Tonight, after everyone's asleep, we sneak into the downs and start retraining Avalon. We'll get it all on camera." Liv's pulse quickened. It sounded reckless, impossible even. But Maya had always made the impossible seem just within reach. Still, Liv's doubt slipped out. What if Avalon's too scared? What if I'm not enough? Maya squeezed her shoulder. "You will be. You're your mother's daughter, Liv. I've seen you with Avalon before, remember? Besides, if you bail, I'll have to do all the dangerous stuff myself. And I'm way more likely to end up on a viral fail compilation." That got a real laugh out of Liv, breaking the tension for a moment. She looked around. The other girls were clustered near the sidelines, scrolling through their phones, oblivious to the gravity of the plan forming right under their noses. The polo match resumed, but Liv and Maya drifted to the back, away from the action. Liv's hands steadied as she stroked Sprint's neck, feeling the pony's calm confidence seep into her. Maya went on, her voice low and urgent. "If we pull this off, we can show the whole village Avalon isn't what they say she is. No more superstitions, no more blaming her for what happened to your mom. Just facts. And if Rupert tries anything, we'll have evidence. We'll upload everything to the cloud. Nobody can delete the truth." Liv felt a spark of hope, tiny but real. She pictured Avalon, frightened but brave, meeting her halfway in the rain. She remembered her mother's words from the journal. "She's only as brave as you are." The school day dragged on, every class a blur. Liv drifted through lectures and recitations, her thoughts locked on what lay ahead. When the bell finally rang, she slipped away with Maya, both girls ducking down the back hallway, away from prying eyes and the endless swirl of gossip. In the locker room, Maya repacked her tech: mic, camera, portable projector, battery packs, checking each piece twice. Liv stuffed her riding gloves and a bag of carrots into her backpack, feeling her nerves tighten and resolve harden at the same time. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the last leaves from the old beeches lining the drive. As they made their way out, Maya paused, her voice softer now. "You know," she said, "your mom used to come by our tea shop every Saturday. She'd talk about Avalon for hours. Said the horse had a soul bigger than anyone she'd ever met." Liv smiled, the ache in her chest less sharp. She believed Avalon was a mirror, that you only got back what you put in. Maya nodded. "Then let's put in something worth getting back." That night, as darkness reclaimed the estate and Whitmore Hall's lights winked out one by one, Liv and Maya prepared. Each step felt like crossing a threshold, not just into the downs, but into a battle for truth, trust, and the legacy of Lady Charlotte. Whatever came next, Liv knew she wouldn't be alone. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of real courage, the kind that might just save them both. Night had fallen heavy and thick over Whitmore Hall, draping the old estate in shadows that seemed alive. The air was crisp and tinged with the scent of wet earth and wild gorse, a memory of the storm still lingering. Most of the staff had long since retreated to their rooms, leaving the sprawling house and its grounds eerily quiet. Only the low, rhythmic snorting of horses from the limestone stables and the occasional hoot of an owl disturbed the hush. Liv waited in her room until the last light blinked out in her father's study. Her nerves thrummed like violin strings, every sense sharpened by anticipation. She checked her phone. 2 quick texts from Maya. "Ready?" And a moment later, "Bring carrots. Soft rope, too." She slid quietly from her room, careful not to let the door click shut, then padded down the back stairs. At the mudroom, she pulled on her old wellies and grabbed her mother's faded rain jacket, which still carried the faintest scent of lavender and saddle leather. In her bag, a bunch of carrots, a length of cotton rope, and her mother's journal tucked deep inside for courage. Outside, Maya waited beneath the yew hedge, hood pulled low, a backpack slung over her shoulder. She grinned when she spotted Liv and brandished a tiny flashlight. "You'd think with all this land, we'd have better places to sneak around," Maya whispered, her eyes alight with mischief and adrenaline. Liv couldn't help a smile, though her heart thudded with anxiety. "If my dad catches us, we'll both be grounded until graduation." "Worth it," Maya replied. "Let's go." They crept through the kitchen garden, following the winding stone wall to a side gate nearly hidden beneath tangled ivy. Liv fished out the spare key and slid it into the lock. Rusty, but it turned with a soft click. They slipped through, closing it behind them, and made for the downs where Avalon's shadowy form stood, half veiled by drifting mist. The night was bright with a 3/4 moon, silvering the dew on the grass and painting everything in ghostly light. The downs stretched wide, wild, and windblown, ringed by ancient oaks. Somewhere beyond, the village glowed faintly, but here, it felt as if they were the last people on earth. As they drew closer, Avalon raised her head, ears pricked, muscles taut. She snorted, pawed the earth, and retreated a few paces, nostrils flaring at the scent of humans. Liv halted, her nerves jangling. "She's spooked," she whispered. "I'll try what Mom wrote, join up." Maya hung back, switching on the tiny camera and flicking her phone to silent. Liv stepped out into the open, arms relaxed, careful to keep her posture unthreatening. She didn't look directly at Avalon, but circled her at a distance, watching the mare out of the corner of her eye. It was harder than it looked in her mother's video. The grass squished underfoot, her breath clouded in the cold, and every instinct screamed at her to hurry. But Liv forced herself to move slowly, turning her back just as her mother had instructed in the journal. She held her breath, heart racing. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Avalon snorted, uncertain, her tail swishing. Then, as Liv exhaled softly, the mare took a hesitant step forward. Another, the distance between girl and horse closed, inch by careful inch, until Liv felt the warm breath against her shoulder. Liv stayed perfectly still. Her whole world seemed to balance on that fragile thread of trust. Avalon nudged her gently, the softest touch of a velvet muzzle against Liv's jacket. Tears stung Liv's eyes, relief, wonder, and the ache of hope all tangled together. Slowly, she raised a hand, letting Avalon sniff her fingers before offering a carrot. The mare crunched it, eyes softening, the tension in her body melting away. From the shadows, Maya filmed everything, her own breath caught in her throat. "Got it?" she whispered, glancing at the tiny screen. "This is gold, Liv. Your mom would have been so proud." Just as Liv began to slip the soft rope around Avalon's neck, a harsh, unexpected noise shattered the moment, a twig snapping, loud in the quiet. Both girls froze. Avalon's ears flicked back. Liv's heart hammered. A flashlight beam swept across the downs, blinding for a second. A figure emerged from the darkness, trench coat flapping, a file of papers in one hand and a phone in the other. It was Rupert Stockton, the estate's manager. Eyes narrowed, mouth twisted into a cold smile. "Well, well," Rupert drawled. "What have we here? Trespassing on your own property, Miss Whitmore? That's a new one, even for you." Liv felt her courage waver, but Maya stepped forward, her own camera raised like a shield. "We're not trespassing. Liv has every right to be here." Rupert's smile sharpened. "Rights, yes, but responsibilities too. You two know the council's ruled Avalon a danger to the public, don't you? There are rules and contracts." He waved the file at them, papers fluttering, the words "sale agreement" visible in bold at the top. "This estate can't keep bleeding money for a lost cause. I have buyers lined up. All I need is Lord Whitmore's signature and, well, no more mystery horse to worry about." He glanced at Avalon with a sneer. "Funny how memories keep people stuck in the past, isn't it? Some things are better left behind." Liv felt a flush of anger, her grip on the rope tightening. "You can't just get rid of her. She's family." Rupert chuckled, stepping closer. "Sentiment is expensive, Olivia, and dangerous. If you keep interfering, I'll have no choice but to call animal control myself. And next time, it'll be tranquilizers, not warnings." He pocketed his phone, glancing over his shoulder at the darkened house. "I suggest you two go back inside before you make things worse. For everyone." He turned on his heel and strode away, the papers in his hand fluttering like the wings of some dark omen. Liv stood frozen for a moment, the anger and fear warring inside her. Maya put a hand on her shoulder, voice trembling but defiant. "He's bluffing, Liv. He has to be." Liv watched the retreating figure, determination growing behind her fear. "Maybe, but we have to move faster. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." Maya nodded, pocketing the footage. "Then let's get to work." And as the night deepened, the two girls led Avalon into the safety of the old paddock, their courage hardening, knowing the real fight was just beginning. The rain held off, but the clouds lingered heavy and low over Bramblewick as morning broke. By 10 o'clock, the church bells tolled over the village green, summoning townsfolk from every narrow lane and mossy stone cottage. The council meeting at St. Wilfrid's was supposed to be routine, a review of harvest fairs, a few road repairs, but word had spread overnight that today, the fate of Avalon and the Whitmore estate would be argued in public. Liv and Maya arrived early, nerves jangling, the portable projector slung between them in an old canvas tote. They climbed the steps of the little stone church, its door darkened by a throng of villagers, some faces familiar and warm, others twisted by suspicion or the thrill of gossip. At the front, Rupert Stockton already stood with his stack of papers, buttoned up in a sharp suit, looking every bit the picture of control. Lord Edward sat apart, his expression blank, shoulders hunched in the pew like he was bracing against a coming storm. Inside, the air was thick with whispers. Mrs. Grant, who ran the free-range egg farm, fanned herself with the agenda, lips pursed tight. The vicar offered a brittle smile. The editor of the Bramblewick Chronicle was there with a notepad, eager for scandal. Over in a corner, Alfie, Maya's little cousin, perched on the windowsill, swinging his legs, while a handful of old men grumbled about damned modern nonsense and haunted horses. The meeting came to order with a sharp rap of the council's wooden gavel. Mr. Bellamy, the chair, cleared his throat. "We have a pressing item of public concern, the issue of safety regarding the animal known as Avalon, property of the Whitmore estate." His eyes flicked uneasily toward Liv and her father. Rupert wasted no time. He stood, voice ringing with righteous authority. We all know about the latest incident. Avalon was loose on the B217 again last night. Could have been a tragedy. This isn't the first time, and it won't be the last. I have consulted with experts, and for the good of Bramblewick, I propose we authorize immediate removal of the animal. For sale, possibly to a circus that's made inquiries. Frankly, anything is safer than keeping her here. A ripple ran through the crowd. Mrs. Grant murmured to her neighbor, the pub owner's wife shook her head, and the Chronicle's editor scribbled furiously. Liv could feel the weight of 100 eyes, most of them old enough to remember her mother's accident, all waiting to see if she would speak. Rupert pressed on, flipping through his stack of legalese. As acting manager of the estate, I am prepared to sign off on the deal pending Lord Whitmore's consent. I move for a council vote. Today. Liv's throat was dry, her hands trembling around the projector bag. Maya nudged her, whispering, "Now or never, Liv." Liv stood, her voice catching at first. "Excuse me, I have something to show everyone, please." Heads swiveled, the room hushed, expectant and tense. Liv plugged the projector into the wall and fumbled with the laptop, heart pounding in her chest. Maya's hand found hers, squeezing once. Steady, unspoken courage. The first images flickered onto the rough plaster wall. Lady Charlotte, young and fearless, galloped bareback across a sunlit field, Avalon at full stride. The laughter, the wild freedom. There was no trace of fear or violence. Lady Charlotte's voice, soft and clear, filled the room. No reins, no force, only trust. That's the gift this horse gives me. Liv spoke, her voice trembling but growing stronger with every word. That's my mother. She loved Avalon. She trusted her, so much that she rode without even a bridle. My mother taught me everything I know about horses. She believed Avalon wasn't dangerous, just misunderstood. Last night I used the same techniques. Avalon came to me. She just wants to come home. A hush fell over the church as the video ended. For a moment, Liv thought she saw tears shining in Mrs. Grant's eyes. But then, the mutters started up again. Suspicion, old pain, the stubborn clinging to village rumor. Rupert didn't miss a beat. A touching film, Miss Whitmore. But we're here to decide on public safety, not sentiment. We can't ignore repeated incidents. How many close calls before we learn our lesson? I urge the council to think of the children, the drivers, the safety of Bramblewick. Liv turned to Lord Edward, searching his face for a sign of support, some break in his mask. But her father's eyes stayed fixed on the floor, lips pressed thin, torn by memories too old to heal in a single morning. Mr. Bellamy called for a vote, the process as cold and mechanical as the toll of the church bell. All in favor of removal, aye. The ayes rang out. Mrs. Grant, the pub owner, 2 elders, a handful of others. Opposed? Only a few voices, Maya among them, a lone stand against the tide. The verdict was clear. The council had spoken. Avalon was to be taken, sedated if necessary, and removed from Whitmore Downs. Liv's world narrowed to a pinpoint, the pain sharp and sudden. Rupert's smile was thin, victorious. Thank you, everyone. I'll see to it that arrangements are made. The gavel fell with a final, echoing crack, sealing Avalon's fate. Lord Edward finally looked up, meeting Liv's gaze for just a moment. So much regret, so much conflict in his eyes. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. People rose, gathering coats and umbrellas, voices low and heavy with finality. Liv stood frozen, tears tracking silently down her cheeks as the crowd parted around her. Maya was at her side in an instant, voice fierce, defiant. We're not giving up. I got it all on film. The whole village saw the truth, even if they won't admit it. Liv wiped her face, determination flickering through the hurt. He's not going to get away with this. Not if I can help it. They walked out into the rain, the first drops falling cold on Liv's skin, the weight of the council's decision pressing down. But somewhere in her chest, a stubborn hope refused to be drowned. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of the fight for Avalon's life, and for everything Liv had left to believe in. Night dropped over Whitmore Hall like a heavy curtain, muffling the world in silence broken only by the wind and the restless murmur of trees along the lane. In the library, Lord Edward sat slumped over paperwork, the glow of a single lamp deepening the lines on his face. Far off, an engine sputtered to life, then faded away into the darkness. No one noticed the Land Rover crawling down the muddy track toward the lower fields, its lights kept off to avoid suspicion. Inside the stables, Liv couldn't sleep. She'd come down under the pretense of checking the horses, but really she needed air, to think, to plan, to keep from drowning in the memory of the council's vote. She stood in the shadows, watching Avalon pace the paddock, every muscle in the mare's body tense, her head up and ears flicking anxiously toward the woods. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a warning lost on everyone except the desperate. Liv was still there when her phone vibrated, almost startling her into dropping it. A message from Maya flashed on her screen. "They're coming. Rupert and 3 guys from town. Big truck. Something's up." Liv's blood ran cold. Her hands shook as she replied, "Where are you?" But Maya's response was almost instant. "I'm following. Hid in the trees by the west wall. Gonna stream it all. Wish me luck." Liv slipped out the side door, moving quick and silent along the hedge line. She crept past the empty garden beds, skirting the shadows, eyes scanning for any sign of headlights. The wind stung her face, and she realized with a shiver that the air had the bite of a coming storm. She ducked behind a thicket, heart pounding, watching as the Land Rover and a second car rolled up the service lane and idled near the far pasture. Rupert stepped out first, jacket collar turned up, clipboard under his arm. He was flanked by 3 men, strangers to Liv, but she recognized the tools they carried. Tranquilizer rifles, thick rope, a handheld thermal drone whirring quietly as one man launched it skyward. Their breath clouded in the cold as they muttered, checking equipment. Maya's voice buzzed in Liv's earpiece. She'd rigged up a makeshift comm system just for this. "I'm streaming now. Got them on video. The drone's up, scanning the fields for heat signatures." Liv's mind raced. There was no way she could stop them alone, not with tranquilizers and numbers on their side. She gripped her phone tight, forcing herself to think. "I'll get to Avalon," she whispered. "Keep recording. Don't let them see you." A sudden crash. A phone clattering on stone. "Damn it!" Maya hissed, voice panicked. "I slipped. Dropped my phone. Wait!" A flashlight beam swung through the trees. "Who's there?" Rupert's voice snapped, harsh and sharp. The men fanned out, combing the undergrowth. Maya's voice came through again, breathless and urgent. "They saw me, running. Lost the phone. It's in the stream. Can you hear me?" Liv cursed under her breath, chest tight with fear for her friend. She sprinted toward the far paddock, using the darkness for cover. Ahead, Avalon stood rigid in the moonlight, her body outlined in silver, every muscle taut with instinct. The drone buzzed overhead, its camera panning, sending live images back to Rupert's tablet. Rupert barked orders. "There, by the old fence! Target acquired! Load the darts!" One of the men raised his rifle, aiming at Avalon's broad flank. Liv didn't stop to think. She dashed into the open, waving her arms, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Stop! Get away from her!" Startled, Avalon bolted toward the fence, but the dart whizzed past, missing by inches. The men shouted, giving chase, boots tearing up the sodden grass. Liv dodged behind the feed shed, then sprinted for the polo barn, where her mother's old tack hung like memories from a life before loss. She found Sprint, her own polo pony, wide-eyed but ready. In seconds, she'd swung a bridle over his head, hopped onto his bare back, and kicked him into a gallop, tearing through the paddock gate before anyone could react. The Land Rover's engine snarled to life, headlights flaring as the hunters tried to box her in. Sprint's hooves thundered over the turf, the wind lashing Liv's hair back from her face. She shouted for Avalon, calling the mare's name again and again, willing her to come, willing her to trust. Avalon hesitated at the edge of the field, wild-eyed, cornered between the drone's buzz and the roar of engines. Liv spurred Sprint forward, cutting off the hunter's path. The men hesitated, not wanting to risk a shot with Liv so close. Maya's voice crackled faintly in her ear. "Still recording, Liv. I got the license plate. Rupert's threatening to call the police. Be careful." But there was no room for caution now. Liv wheeled Sprint between Avalon and the men, raising her arms in a gesture of defiance. "You're trespassing," she shouted, "and I have it all on video. Leave now or I'll call the police myself." For a split second, the world held its breath. The drone hovered, its red eye blinking. Avalon tossed her head, then bolted past Liv, straight toward the stream. One man lunged with a rope, but missed, tumbling into the mud. The Land Rover reversed, spinning its wheels in the wet grass. Rupert's face, pale and furious in the light, glared out the window. "This isn't over, Olivia. You're making a mistake." Liv didn't answer. She raced after Avalon, Sprint's muscles bunching under her, the adrenaline burning away her fear. She followed the dapple-grey form down the embankment, hearing the drone crash into a branch overhead. A wild laugh escaped her lips. Half relief, half disbelief. Behind her, Maya appeared, muddy and out of breath, cradling her soggy phone. "Still live?" she gasped. "You're a legend, Liv." But Liv barely heard her. She leapt off Sprint and ran to Avalon, who stood trembling by the stream, sides heaving, eyes wide with terror and trust. Liv threw her arms around the mare's neck, murmuring comfort as Maya limped up, grinning through bruised shins. "You got it all?" Liv whispered. Maya nodded, holding up her battered phone. "Every second, the world's going to see what really happened." As thunder rumbled in the distance and the last of the hunters slunk away, Liv felt a strange surge of hope. They'd bought Avalon another night, but she knew, deep down, this was only the beginning of the real storm. Morning never truly came, just a pale, trembling light that slipped through thunderclouds, silvering the rain-drenched village and laying a hush over Bramblewick. The River Rye, swollen from a week of relentless storms, rushed through the valley with a force no one had seen in decades. At first it was just a rumor, a leaky bank, a little water spilling into the lower pastures. By midday, the rumors became panic as the old earthwork dam above the market fields began to split and groan. Liv woke from a shallow sleep, her clothes still muddy, her hair tangled. She'd spent what was left of the night with Maya, watching their blurry footage on repeat, plotting next steps, adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. She heard the first alarms in the distance, a chorus of sirens, shouts, the desperate barking of dogs as the world outside erupted into chaos. Downstairs, Lord Edward was already on the phone, voice tight. "Yes, sandbags on the lane. Get the church hall open. Evacuate the market field. That's priority." He caught Liv's eye, and for a moment, the anger between them evaporated, replaced by something fierce and urgent. He nodded once. She understood. There was no time for old arguments now. Outside, the village was a frenzy of motion. People rushed through the muddy streets, hauling crates, stacking hay bales, guiding frightened sheep and ponies onto higher ground. The once gentle river now churned brown and wild, snapping at its banks, tearing branches from the willows. Children cried, the elderly huddled in the pub as volunteers ferried buckets and kettles, and the vicar led a handful in prayer, his cassock flapping in the wind. At the edge of the chaos, Maya was live-streaming, her battered phone capturing every frantic face, every shout, her feed exploding with viewers from around the county. "This is Bramblewick," she said breathlessly, "and the river's about to break through. If anyone can come help, we need you now." In the scramble, Liv spotted a familiar flash of gray at the far end of the downs. Avalon, untethered, wild, pacing the fence line, nostrils flared at the distant rising roar. For a second, Liv's heart stuttered with dread. If the river broke, the downs would flood, and Avalon could be swept away, or worse. She turned, racing for the stables, nearly colliding with Alfie, Maya's little cousin, who was trying to pull his toy caravan out of the path of the water. "Get inside!" Liv shouted, but Alfie just shook his head, pointing frantically toward the bridge where the river foamed over the stones. "My caravan. My stuff's in there." But there was no time. With a deafening crack, the dam gave way. A wall of muddy water surged down the slope, swallowing fences and washing hay bales aside like matchsticks. People screamed, scrambling for higher ground. Alfie, trapped between the flood and his beloved caravan, froze as the water swept around his ankles. Liv bolted toward him, fighting the current, slipping and scrambling over the churned-up grass. "Alfie, come here, now!" But Alfie was crying, clutching the caravan door, the river rising around his legs. Liv waded into the torrent, heart hammering, the force of the water nearly knocking her down. She grabbed Alfie's arm, trying to pull him free, but the mud sucked at their boots, and the water was rising, rising. Suddenly, a shrill whistle cut through the storm. Avalon, her eyes wild, mane streaming with rain, reared on the embankment, then plunged into the current. The sight stunned Liv. Avalon, the so-called cursed mare, charging straight into danger without hesitation. Liv called out, her voice half sob, half prayer. "Avalon, here, help us!" The mare pushed through the water, powerful muscles churning, fighting the river's pull. Maya, still streaming, gasped in awe, camera trained on the unbelievable sight. "She's going for them! She's actually—" Avalon reached Liv and Alfie, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on Liv's. Remembering her mother's lessons, Liv wrapped the caravan's loose rope around Avalon's neck and tied the other end to the stuck caravan, her fingers numb with cold. "Easy, girl. You can do this." Avalon strained against the current, hooves slipping, but she held steady as Liv boosted Alfie onto the mare's back. The boy clung to her mane, sobbing with fear, while Liv braced herself against the caravan. "Pull, Avalon! Come on, you can do it!" For an instant, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The river roaring, the caravan teetering, Alfie's cry lost in the wind. Then, with a heave, Avalon dragged the caravan free, stumbling up the bank, Liv and Alfie clinging desperately to her sides. A cheer went up from the villagers who watched, wide-eyed from the safety of the churchyard. Lord Edward, covered in mud, sprinted across the grass to help haul Alfie to safety. Liv tumbled into his arms, Avalon trembling but unhurt, her sides heaving with exhaustion. Maya's stream caught it all. The rescue, the tears, the moment the so-called cursed horse became a hero. "Did you see that?" Maya shouted at her viewers. "Avalon just saved a kid. She's not a danger. She's a miracle." As the last of the floodwaters receded, leaving the market field in chaos and the villagers in shock, Liv knelt beside Avalon, stroking her neck, tears streaming down her face. The old legends of ghosts and curses were already fading, drowned by the sight of courage and loyalty no one could deny. Lord Edward crouched beside them, laying a gentle hand on Liv's shoulder. He said nothing, but his eyes told her everything. Pride, relief, and something that looked a lot like forgiveness. Avalon nuzzled Liv's cheek, her body shivering but her spirit unbroken. For the first time since her mother's death, Liv felt a weight lift from her chest. The past was still there, but so was the possibility of something new, of healing, of hope, of a family made whole again. In the muddy, rain-soaked aftermath, Avalon stood as proof that trust could be rebuilt, that old wounds could be faced, and that sometimes the most unlikely hero was the one everyone feared. The rain finally slowed, leaving the village battered but strangely bright, the clouds tearing apart in ragged strips as golden sunlight spilled over the sodden fields. News of the rescue had spread faster than the flood itself. By the time Liv, Avalon, and Lord Edward reached the village square, a small crowd had already gathered. Maya's live stream was replaying on half a dozen phones, children wide-eyed, the elderly shaking their heads in disbelief. The so-called cursed horse had just become a legend. Avalon stood quietly, mud-streaked and dripping, as neighbors and strangers alike stared. Some moved in closer, tentative at first, then bolder as the shock wore off. A little girl, shivering in a yellow raincoat, reached out and stroked Avalon's nose. The mare lowered her head, calm as spring grass, and the child's nervous giggle broke the spell of fear. In the crowd, Rupert pushed his way forward, jacket torn, eyes wild with frustration. His voice cut through the gathering like a blade. "It was a stunt, nothing more. Don't let yourselves be fooled by sentiment. The animal is still dangerous. She got lucky, that's all. You saw what happened at the council?" But no one was listening. Lord Edward stepped in front of his daughter, the first time he'd publicly taken her side since the accident that changed everything. He turned to the villagers, his voice clear and strong, the years of grief finally lifting from his shoulders. "I've spent too long running from ghosts. My wife believed in this horse. My daughter believed in her too. Today, Avalon proved herself, not just to us, but to this whole village. She isn't a danger. She's part of our family, and she belongs here, with us." There was a stunned silence, broken only by the soft clicking of phone cameras and a rising murmur of approval. The council chair, Mr. Bellamy, nodded slowly. "I suppose it's time we reconsidered our vote." Rupert's face flushed with anger. "You can't just change the rules because of one act." "Why not?" Mrs. Grant called out from the crowd. "You were the one who kept insisting Avalon was a threat. Well, she just saved Alfie and Liv. That's more than any of us did." Maya, never one to miss a dramatic moment, panned her phone across the crowd. "You're live right now," she announced to Rupert. "So if you have anything to say about your business deals or your attempt to have Avalon taken away last night, now's your chance." Rupert spluttered, caught off guard by the cameras and the growing mutters in the crowd. I was just following protocol." There are financial pressures and— A sharp voice cut him off. Mrs. Donnelly, who ran the post office and always had a keen eye for trouble, waved a set of emails she'd printed off. We all saw the paperwork, Rupert. You tried to sell the Downs to that resort developer without telling the community. And you tried to get rid of Avalon because she reminded everyone too much of Lady Charlotte. You're the danger here, not her. A ripple of outrage ran through the crowd. Someone called for a council investigation. Rupert, blustering and red-faced, found himself at the center of an angry circle, villagers demanding answers, voices rising above the remnants of the storm. Through it all, Lord Edward remained calm, his hand resting on Avalon's withers, grounding himself. He turned to Liv, his voice gentler than she'd heard in years. You were right. I let my fear rule this house for too long. Liv's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. She never stopped trusting us, Dad. Not once. He squeezed her hand, then faced the crowd once more. As of today, I am withdrawing all plans to sell or redevelop Whitmore Downs. In memory of my wife, and in honor of what we witnessed here, I am formally designating this land as a community sanctuary. For horses, for children, for anyone who needs a place to heal. The village erupted in applause, a cathartic release of years of grief, superstition, and division. Maya cheered, spinning around with her phone, catching the moment for everyone still watching online. Rupert, realizing he'd lost, tried to slip away, but Mr. Bellamy caught him by the sleeve. You'll stay for the council's questions. We'll want to see those contracts and your expense reports, Rupert. Liv hugged Avalon, pressing her face into the mare's wet mane, her heart thumping with relief and pride. Around her, neighbors gathered, offering apologies, congratulations, and finally, understanding. Even the most skeptical villagers seemed to soften, patting Avalon's flank, murmuring that maybe the stories were wrong all along. Lord Edward, for the first time in years, allowed himself to smile. He stood with his daughter in the fading sunlight, watching Avalon bask in gentle attention, her once feared presence now a source of comfort and awe. A news van from BBC Three arrived, drawn by Maya's viral stream and the village's collective excitement. Reporters scrambled out, microphones ready, eager for interviews. Maya beamed, already answering questions about her footage and the dramatic rescue. Liv found herself pulled into interviews, her words halting at first, then flowing with the clarity that comes from hard-won truth. Avalon's never been dangerous. She's just been misunderstood, like a lot of us. Today, she proved what trust can do. As dusk settled and the crowd thinned, Liv, her father, and Maya stood in the quiet square, Avalon nuzzling them both. The old divisions had faded, and hope shimmered where fear once lived. In the hush before nightfall, Lord Edward leaned close. Let's start again, Liv. The right way, this time. Liv nodded, her heart lighter than it had been since her mother's accident. And as Avalon lifted her head to the wind, a sense of true belonging settled over Whitmore Hall, binding family and community together for the first time in years. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had finally exhausted itself, leaving the world washed clean. Sunlight glinted on puddles across the village green, painting the battered streets with reflections of blue sky and fresh hope. At Whitmore Hall, the air was alive with a sense of newness, a feeling Liv hadn't known in years. For the first time since her mother's accident, the halls rang with laughter instead of silence, and Liv felt a weight had finally lifted from her chest. She sat in the old library, a mug of tea cradled in her hands, watching Avalon graze contentedly outside the window. Her mother's journal rested open in her lap, the pages soft from years of use. Liv ran her fingers over her mother's handwriting, so familiar, so steady. She found the last entry, the words written in a hurried but hopeful script. Nobility isn't found in a family crest or the size of one's estate, but in the courage to feel deeply for others. In the end, true bravery is the willingness to stand with the vulnerable, even when the world refuses to understand. Liv read the words aloud, her voice trembling but strong. Maya, curled in an armchair editing video on her laptop, looked up and smiled. That sounds like the perfect ending for your mom's story. Or maybe the beginning of yours. They both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that came from deep relief, from the knowledge that pain had finally given way to healing. Liv closed the journal, hugging it to her chest. I think she'd be proud. Of all of us. Downstairs, Lord Edward had called a meeting of the estate staff and a few trusted villagers. For years, the Whitmore name had carried a sort of haunted respect, a legacy both revered and feared. But today, as people gathered in the sunlit dining room, the energy was different. Open, hopeful, determined to turn the page. Lord Edward stood at the head of the table, no longer the distant, sorrowful figure he'd been since his wife's death. He was clear-eyed, his voice steady as he outlined plans for the new community sanctuary. Whitmore Downs will not be sold or developed, he declared. We'll dedicate it as a sanctuary, open for community events, equine therapy, and educational workshops. I want the legacy of this family, of Lady Charlotte, to be one of healing and empathy, not fear or loss. There was a ripple of applause, even a few cheers, and Mrs. Grant dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Mr. Bellamy added, It's about time Bramblewick had something to bring people together, not push them apart. Afterward, Liv and Maya retreated to the paddocks, camera in hand. They filmed new footage. Avalon running free, children laughing as they fed her carrots, villagers repairing fences together. Maya was determined to tell the real story, not just the drama or the legends, but the transformation the village had gone through. We'll call it Avalon, from blame to bravery, Maya said, crouching in the grass as she framed the perfect shot of Avalon's gentle eyes. It's not just about a horse. It's about all of us learning to stop being afraid and start listening. As days passed, Maya's documentary began to take shape. The footage was raw, honest, full of moments of pain and healing. Liv confronting her father, Lord Edward standing before the council, Avalon's flood rescue replayed in slow motion, the village's voiceover stories about fear, forgiveness, and second chances. Maya layered in interviews, weaving together a narrative that was bigger than any single family or animal. She drew on psychology, on leadership, on the strange power of community memory. In one segment, she cut between Lady Charlotte's training notes and new interviews with Liv. When you work with a horse using body language and trust, Liv explained to the camera, you learn it's not about dominance. It's about empathy. Avalon taught me that. My mom called it liberty riding, leading without force. Turns out it works with people too. Maya's editing was masterful, her instincts sharp. She reached out to the local news, then to the BBC. Within a week, Avalon, from blame to bravery, was trending on social media. Messages poured in from viewers all over the country. People who'd lost family, who'd been blamed or misunderstood, who'd found healing in the strangest places. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Liv and Maya sat together under the old oak tree where Lady Charlotte used to picnic. Maya read aloud a message from a BBC 3 producer. We'd like to buy the rights to your documentary. It's an extraordinary story, and we want to share it with the world." Liv laughed in disbelief, tears pricking her eyes again. "Your little live stream just went national, Maya." Maya grinned. "Not just mine, yours, Avalon's, all of ours." That evening, Liv joined her father in the study. He handed her a new copy of the family crest, now embossed with an image of Avalon in mid-stride. "We're changing the Whitmore emblem," he said quietly. "Your mother would have liked that." Liv smiled, running her thumb over the golden lines. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." They sat in companionable silence as twilight fell, each lost in their own thoughts, but no longer alone in their grief. Later, as the documentary's closing credits rolled online, Maya added a voiceover that lingered in the hearts of everyone who watched. "History is written by the brave, but healing belongs to everyone. When we listen to each other, when we lead with empathy, not fear, we build something that lasts. This is not the story of a cursed horse or a broken family. This is a story of courage, community, and the freedom to begin again." Avalon, grazing quietly in the golden light, lifted her head as Liv approached, nuzzling her hand with gentle affection. Liv whispered, "We did it, girl. We really did." In that moment, Liv realized the lesson wasn't just about horses or heritage. It was about courage, the kind that reached across old wounds and found something better on the other side. And as night settled over Whitmore Hall, Liv knew that she and the village were ready for whatever came next. Summer arrived in Bramblewick like a long-held breath finally released. The air shimmered with warmth, bees drifted through fields of wildflowers, and the village, once haunted by rumors and old pain, prepared for the first Whitmore Summer Festival in decades. Everywhere signs of renewal gleamed: painted fences, bunting in bright colors, and a row of cheerful stalls curving across the green where the flood had raged just weeks before. Liv stood at the edge of the fairgrounds, heart pounding, not from fear, but from a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt since childhood. Avalon grazed beside her, mane brushed silver in the sun, a garland of wild roses woven into her bridle by the children of the village. For once, there was no trace of the haunted, misunderstood creature the townsfolk once whispered about. Instead, Avalon was the centerpiece, hero, symbol, and friend. The festival opened with the chiming of the old church bells. People flooded the green, children tugging parents' hands, elders laughing together, even reporters from regional TV. Tables overflowed with cakes and jam. Hand-painted signs announced the new Whitmore Community Sanctuary, and Maya darted through the crowd with her camera, capturing every smile, every dance, every moment of belonging. The main event was set for the afternoon, a demonstration of liberty riding, just as Lady Charlotte had done years ago, but this time with Liv and Avalon at the heart of it all. As Liv stepped into the ring, applause echoed across the downs. Her father stood near the fence, pride in his eyes. Maya and the council waved from the stands. Alfie perched on his dad's shoulders, beaming. Liv took a deep breath, letting the cheers fade into the background. She signaled to Avalon with a soft whistle, just as her mother had taught her. The mare trotted in a wide arc, muscles rippling beneath her dappled coat, then spun and cantered, free of rope or saddle, following Liv's every gesture. The crowd fell silent, awed by the unspoken language between girl and horse. The story of trust, built step by trembling step, on nights when the world seemed stacked against them. Liv dropped to her knees, arms open, and Avalon trotted to her, lowering her head until their foreheads touched. The applause was thunderous. Liv rose, stroking Avalon's cheek, heart so full it ached. As the demonstration ended, Lord Edward crossed the ring. He carried a small, ornate medal on a blue ribbon, the newly minted Whitmore Medal of Empathy, a tribute to Lady Charlotte and the new future of the estate. He pinned it to Liv's jacket, his voice steady, carrying across the gathered crowd. Liv, today you remind us all that courage is quiet, that true leadership is born from empathy, and that healing is possible, even when we think it's out of reach. You've honored your mother's memory and given us all a reason to believe again. A hush fell, then someone, Maya, started a chant. For Liv, for Avalon, for all of us! The cheers rose, laughter and applause mingling as children rushed the fence to pet Avalon and volunteers began selling raffle tickets for the Flood Rescue Fund. Later, under a white marquee, Lord Edward took the microphone and announced the launch of a new scholarship, the Lady Charlotte Whitmore Fund for Equine Therapy, open to children from across Yorkshire struggling with trauma or loss. The audience listened, moved and inspired, as he described how horses, once a symbol of privilege, would now become a source of healing and hope for all. Maya took the stage next, presenting a short cut of her documentary. The crowd watched, transfixed, as the story of Avalon unfolded. Her supposed curse, the accident, the fear, and finally the rescue and rebirth. Faces in the crowd reflected every emotion: shame, awe, pride, relief. When the film ended, Maya invited everyone to share their own stories of rumors, misunderstandings, and redemption. One by one, villagers stood to speak. Mrs. Grant apologized for voting against Avalon. Alfie's father admitted he'd been afraid, but Avalon had saved his son's life. Even old Mr. Bellamy, the council chair, said quietly, "We're all guilty of letting fear drive us. But today, we choose something better." As dusk settled, Liv and Avalon led the closing parade, a line of children waving, flags streaming, lanterns glowing gold and blue. The sun dipped behind the hills, turning Avalon's mane to liquid fire. In that magical twilight, Liv felt her mother's presence beside her, soft as a whisper, strong as memory. After the last raffle was called, and the crowd began to drift home, Lord Edward wrapped his arm around Liv's shoulders, his voice low. "We did it. You did it." Liv smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of gratitude. We all did, Avalon most of all. They watched as Maya recorded her final message, the camera panning over the crowd, the banners, and finally, Avalon, grazing peacefully on the green. "Have you ever believed a rumor and regretted it?" Maya asked, her voice echoing clear into the summer air. Share your story below. Like, subscribe, and help us spread courage, kindness, and second chances. The world needs more of them. As the festival lights flickered on, Liv led Avalon up the hill behind the hall, pausing beneath the clock tower where it all began. She let the reins fall, watching as Avalon broke into a gallop, her silhouette outlined by the last flare of sunset. The mare's mane streamed like silk, and Liv knew, without doubt or fear, that real freedom had finally come, not just for Avalon, but for everyone who had the courage to let go of the past. As night deepened, a breeze carried Lady Charlotte's favorite song across the fields. Liv closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle within her. Real freedom begins when we stop running from what scares us and start running toward what we hope to become. And so, with hearts unburdened and a new story written across the hills, Whitmore Hall stood ready to welcome the dawn of everything yet to come.